I visited Israel for the first time. Here's what I learned. After debating members of Knesset, I understand why Israel has lost support on the right. Opinion polling shows that Zoomers aren't Zionists. 60% of Americans aged 18 to 24 support Hamas over Israel. That's a Harvard Harris part poll that he cites. He says part of this is because Gen Z is the most diverse generation in history, with 21% of blacks and 19% of Hispanics aged 18 to 29 agree with the statement, quote, Hitler had some good ideas, compared to only 9% of whites. But a lot more people are just not interested in another war in the Middle East. Decades of wasting American blood and treasure on failed regime change wars has made MAGA skeptical of interventionist foreign policy. If it weren't for mass Muslim migration into England, I wouldn't pay attention to the war in Gaza. I'm not Jewish. I'm not a dispensationalist. Calling everyone from Donald Trump to Sydney Sweeney to PewDiePie has desensitized a generation to the post-war guilt complex. If Israel wants a way to appeal to young white men like me who care more about our countries than the Middle East, it needs a new sales pitch. Conservatives see a double standard between Zionism and the liberalism forced upon Britain, Europe, and the United States. Israel has high GDP per capita and above replacement birth rate, competent military, coherent ethnic and religious majority identity, and culture of national service. I want all of that for England. If it's good enough for Israel, it's good enough for us. Just as Israel is a homeland for the Jewish people, England should be a homeland for the English, Europe for Europeans, and the US for heritage Americans. But this view was shocking when I presented it to the academics and politicians I met on my trip. The same Jews who were adamant that Israel is an ethnostate and that civic nationalism does not work would tell me America is a melting pot and a nation of immigrants. When I suggested we deport jihadists from Britain and Europe, they became uncomfortable. They cited constraints of international law despite disregarding its anti Israel rulings as anti Semitic and illegitimate. Some, like members of Knesset Danny Danon and Ram Ben Barak, I don't know if you know those guys, have suggested Europe take in Palestinians when evicted from Gaza as refugees. Why should we accommodate another dangerous Muslim population if Israel recognizes them as existential threat that they cannot live alongside? So he goes on, but that's the gist of his point is he's like, wait a minute. Like, you guys have this ethno-nationalist idea, and actually a lot of us we think it's cool. We want that too. But then when we tell you guys that we want this, you guys like shriek away in like horror, thinking, how dare you want to make England or the United States some sort of an ethno-nation? Why do you think that attitude exists? Now, he's got his own, he's kind of like, hey, what's good for Jews should be good for the rest of us kind of a mentality. I think he's kind of missing the point, but I'm curious, why do you think the Israelis, like when he's over there on this trip, why they would just think, no, 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 the rest of the West, because this kind of plays into a bit of a conspiracy theory that's going around, right? That it's, the Jews are doing all the bad things. And one of the things the Jews are doing to us is that the Jews are bringing in all the immigrants, that it's the Jews' fault, that America's being like multicultural, the pushing of, have you seen these theories that they're
Yeah,
saying,
so yeah.
right? So the idea is that it's, that all this multiculturalism and multinationalism that's being pushed on the West is coming from the Jews, that it's some sort of plot. And then, when he goes over there and he has these conversations, and on one side of their mouth, they're saying, we want an ethno nation. And on the other side, they say, but you can't have one. How dare you? That would be against international law. Where do you think that is? What is that? Because there's a big Jewish plot to multicultural and, make it multi-ethnic in the West? Or what do you think, what is the issue there?
Yeah, so first, a lot to unpack there. First of all, I want to say if there is a large Jewish plot to create multiculturalism, no one's told me about it, so I'm out of the loop in the
You didn't
in
get,
this
well,
plot.
I mean, Shael, I mean, you are being kind of ostracized entirely.
I
So,
I am, but not because of that. So yeah, let's see. It's actually a fascinating conversation that has to. I'm having to think on my toes here on how to respond to this. So first of all, I agree with the fact that there's a double standard here that this person has identified. I'm agreeing with that from the perspective of I think that ethnostates are wrong, whether it's Israel doing it or whether it's the United States doing it. So I've come to the conclusion that it's true. Israel has been making, is based on discrimination in a way that no state should ever be based on. And what this guy's saying is Israel's based on discrimination, and that's great. I want discrimination too. Which that's a very different thing. Now, regarding the approach of the Israelis, I'm a little bit surprised at how Danon, who's more right wing, responded. I'd like to see how Danon actually responded, but those are older guys, and they still view Israel's ethno-nationalism as sort of something that's forced on Israel by anti-Semitism. That's the traditional Israeli line. We face all this anti-Semitism. We want to be open. We want to live with the Arabs, but there's all this anti-Semitism. We face all these threats. They want to kill us, so we have no choice but to do ethno-nationalism. Meanwhile, you in the West, you have a choice, and therefore you shouldn't do it. It's something that we do out of necessity. I think
Okay.
it's the view there. Younger, but and a lot of older conservatives, the same age as Danon, felt that way. Like, look at someone like Marco Rubio, who also wanted some immigration and so on and so forth. It wasn't, America first type. So it's similar to that. Younger Israelis, much like younger right wingers in your countries, don't feel that way. They hate Muslims in a way that earlier generations of Israelis at least would never admit to. It used to be in Israel saying you hate Muslims and you hate Arabs and you hate Palestinians was not acceptable. You had to, hide it in euphemisms and pretend you were more tolerant than you were. We also had our version of PC, and this might be surprising to anyone who follows Israel today because everyone says whatever they want. But back in the 90s to early 2000s, you did not do that. Even during the Second Intifada, you did not do that. But younger ones are much more like this person that you brought as an example. A lot of younger Israelis, if you talk to them, especially influencers and people who just got into the Knesset and people who will be in the Knesset in the future, people in the army right now, would totally agree with him. They would say, you also absolutely should keep those Muslims out. They're horrible. They're terrorists. They should either be dead or stay in their countries.
Mm.
I think he ran into a sort of hypocrisy that is part of traditional Israel, and a hypocrisy that I fell a victim to in a way. That I bought it. I bought that lie, and now maybe it's a good thing, maybe not. Depends on your perspective. They don't lie anymore. There's no pretense anymore. Those people are a relic of the past. So I think the conversation's a little outdated, actually,
Hmm.
that he's
Okay.
having. These are attitudes that are kind of changing. I'll give you an example from official Israel. The foreign ministry put out a tweet a few days ago that shocked me, but I think that's where Israel's going. They put out a tweet talking about how Europe's falling because there's all these Muslims in all these countries. Did you see that? They had an amount of Muslims in different countries, and Europe's in danger, and all this. The kind of thing that
Yeah.
white nationalists in Europe put out daily. And it was the Israeli Foreign Ministry doing that. And the Israeli Foreign Ministry has never, and I worked with them, has never done anything like that or said anything like that. Back in the day, their bureaucrats never even thought that way. They were part of a sort of liberal cosmopolitan elite, is how they saw themselves. That's changing. The Israeli government today increasingly sees itself as part of the world of Viktor Orban and Trump and Wilders in Netherlands and Le Pen in France. That kind of world, which is anti-immigration and anti-Islam. So that hypocrisy is real, but it's outdated. The
Yeah.
pretense behind racism today is being ripped away all around the world, and it's being ripped away in Israel too. So maybe he'll be pleased to see that Israel will be more accepting of the kind of racism that he wants in the UK than it is right now.
Yeah. I mean, my interpretation, and maybe, maybe I was wrong on this, but I thought, well, I mean, of course, the Israelis would say, "Wait a minute, no, you've got to have multiculturalism because we need you to take all these Muslims. Like, we don't want them here." And so, and not only do we want the Palestinians gone, and so we want other people to take them, but then we're going to work on, the greater Israel project. So we're going to need the Syrians have got to go, the Lebanese have got to go, some of the Egyptians have got to go, right? Like all these groups have got to go. And where are they going to go? They got to go to you because we don't want them here with us. And
Yeah,
so
well,
there's maybe that.
maybe in the specific case of people you want to get rid of, you're fine. I'm talking from the perspective of a like racist right wing Israeli right now. Maybe you're
Okay.
fine if a bunch of if Gazans go to Europe or something like that. But Israelis always talk about what happens when there's so many Muslims in Europe that the countries turn pro-Muslim, and then Israel has no one to trade with.
Uh,
Israelis have nowhere to go on vacation just from that. Like Israelis now go on vacation to Europe and they're terrified. They don't they see how many Muslims are. I hear these conversations all the time, even from my liberal friends. They go to Europe and they think that it's about to become a caliphate, and that terrifies them for the future of Israel and for the future of the world from their perspective. They don't want that.
Interesting.
They're very concerned that millions of people, not from Syria or Gaza, where they may agree that that could be a good thing, but from Pakistan, from Indonesia, from wherever, there's nothing to do with them, end up there. They look at Qatar buying things up. They're worried that there will be a sort of Islamic state in Europe. It's not going to happen, at least not anytime soon. But they're concerned about that. Um,
Maybe.
the, when you look at who Israel's negotiating with to take the Gazans, it's not Europe. They're negotiating with Somaliland, South Sudan, Indonesia,
Right.
all kinds of countries like that. They want them there where they're not going to take more pro-Israeli countries and make them more anti-Israel. So they're
Interesting.
looking at that too.
Yeah, that actually, you bring up a really great point. That maybe is why, with the plans of what happens after, the day after, what happens with Gaza, right? And they talk about deporting all these Gazans to places. I guess that makes sense why they want to put them in like 50 different countries. I mean, they've been, because there's no strength in those types of numbers, right? I mean, if you could divide and conquer. So keep Muslims spread out everywhere. Don't and it's a great point. If there's a lot that have entered into a country. I mean, England has a lot, and so does France. Um, then you're going to have those countries turn politically on Israel because the Muslim population will say, "Hey," and I don't necessarily know if it's a. I mean, I don't. I know France is having a bit of a problem, but I think France's problem with their Muslim population has more to do. I mean, I've lived in France for a period of time, and I could tell you, I think it has more to do with just embedded racism in France and not they just you're not French unless you're French, and you could be born and raised in France, your parents were born and raised in France, but because your heritage is Moroccan, then they just won't view you truly as French, and it's caused a real problem with some of the youth that feel like they're never accepted and fully embraced into French culture as much as they want to be, and so they take an alternative path, and that is one of anger, and then one that turns into, you know, uh just people go in different directions when they feel no sense of belonging in one spot, they find another place to belong, and that's the danger in that they're going to go and find these extremist groups or extremist ideology to go belong to, and then you're going to end up with these acts of terrorism and whatnot. So I think France has a bit of a problem, but that's because French are assholes in general.
Yeah,
Sorry to
no,
any French viewers, but
I
come
just
on,
want to
you are.
clarify that what I was saying was the right wing Israeli racist view. It is not
No,
how
I get,
I view things
right,
at all. Yeah, and I agree with
right,
you 100% about France. The way that the French Muslims have, you know, acclimatized to living there versus American Muslims is
yeah,
very telling. In America, whatever faults we have, and boy do we have them, we've done a much better job
oh
uh,
yeah,
with with our Muslim immigrants, and that shows that the problem isn't Muslim immigrants. The problem is, what do you do when they arrive? How do you
right,
integrate them into society? How do you treat them? Do you treat
right,
them like Americans? Here, we're fairly good at treating all kinds of people from weird places as Americans. That
right.
might be ending, but we've had that, and that's been very good for us. And the more Europeans act like the way in the exclusionary way that you're saying, the worse results they're going to get. I
Yeah,
totally agree with
and
you.
I don't see that happening in the UK as much. They have a huge Muslim population. Muhammad is the number 1 baby name in the UK at this point. It's been a top 10 name for years, over a decade, but they integrate them a lot better in the UK than France. I mean, the French are just French. They can they don't like any of us. They don't like anybody. They don't like any of us. They don't even like themselves or each other, you know? So, there but in the UK, now you've got you see Muslim mayors and Muslim politicians and totally and completely integrated in. And so, yeah, I think that population, they're very, educated, they're living in the UK, and Yeah, they're going to turn on Israel, right? They're going to say, hey, we see that you're treating Muslims like they're, or people that are Arabs like they're animals rather than, and worse than animals, rather than like they're human beings and equals. And that's got to end. And so there's going to be that shift in viewpoint. Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. It is free for you to watch. Again, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.